Bill Chang earlier talking about folks like you should reimagine your title as being the Chief Innovation Officer. Do you see yourself as the CIO in that descriptor?
I can see that that's appropriate in the near future. I think the issue within the tax office, as an example at the moment, is everybody wants to be the Chief Innovation Officer. You know, everyone says, pick me, you know, they're sort of looking for that. And I have been trying to encourage people in the office to not think about innovation as just continuous improvement.
Right.
For me, innovation is really about step change, doing something very different to what you've been doing before.
And do you see that as a bit of a trap, the idea that it can be seen just as another piece around continuous improvement? Yes, we need to improve our systems bit by bit.
Definitely. I mean, given the limited bandwidth that you've got to just set your mind to anything, if it gets consumed with finessing and small incremental changes, then suddenly, before you know it, you've run out of time to do the large step changes. So in a way, it's the biggest enemy to step change is, in fact, continuous improvement. Yeah. So I'm lobbying that we should have a balance between that continuous improvement or enhancement and step change. And we did that some years ago with a big internal program that we called our change program. And we segregated that from the continuous improvement work that was happening, because it was just so substantial, the work that needed to be done, and the focus needed to be 100% on that major change, that we did it that way.
All right, now the theme today is this customer-driven economy, and that seems, why has that got anything to do with the ATO? In a sense, you're the taxman, you're the enforcers here. Whether or not we feel we are at the centre of your considerations and you're empathetic to us, I would have thought was secondary to collecting taxes.
Yes, I think you mentioned earlier it was sort of keep the bastards honest or something.
Right.
Yes, we have the law on our side,
right.
Notwithstanding the loopholes that are there, of course. But we have, our business model is more about working from the basis that because the law is complex, because the law is therefore hard for everyone to understand, that more often than not, probably 95% and even more are just don't understand what their obligations are. So we work on the basis that we should make it easier for them to do those interactions with us and try to clarify what those obligations are. And you know, we end up with, there's only a small portion, a fraction of a percent of people that really are truly mischievous. And we call them serious non-compliance. You know, we've got a group that goes after these individuals and businesses because they deliberately are trying to avoid their obligation. So we come at it from an awareness that citizens and all taxpayers, they will meet their obligation, right? And we just have to help them with that.
Okay, and so then how does that inform how you start to imagine what a citizen-centred service offering will look like for the ATO?
So if we think of it that way, then we have to put ourselves, and I think Michael Hart mentioned it this morning, we really have to put ourselves in the shoes of the client or our customer. I don't know the words that Michael used, but basically we talk about the client experience. And the client experience for us is our way, and the mantra, it's a mantra, it's almost a phrase that is quite universally used within the office to get people to think about what will this mean to someone who is going to use this service. So we take that very, very seriously, and what it does is it shifts your perspective. And that's very important because you can get so consumed with what you want to do and why you want to do it, but not will that be good for others as well. So across government, that is catching on. Government today is pretty well siloed. You know, you'll deal with the tax office for some things, you'll deal with the Department of Human Services. I can really only talk about federal government. Department of Human Services, whether it be Centrelink or child support and Medicare. But they tend to be isolated experiences.
Yeah.
And so where there is a substantial momentum building up internally within government now to make this a connected government and offer like a one-stop shop conceptually type of access.
And one of the ideas that floats around about that is, what if I could tell the federal government, and I don't care whether I'm dealing with Medicare or the ATO or any other branch of government. As far as I'm concerned, I'm dealing with government, but what if I could tell you once?
Absolutely. So tell us once is a key theme in that regard, so that if you change your address, then you'll tell us once, and all of the agencies that you interact with will get that percolated. Now, there are a whole lot of, the devil's in the detail in a lot of this, because we hold in the tax office your residential address, your business address, your mailing address, and a whole range of other things that we would call address, that in other areas of government operations, they might not. I mean, Centrelink will probably call it your home address, I mean, as an example, because if you go to Centrelink, you're not employed, say, or such. And so we've got to harmonise that as well, so that it makes sense, because if you give us one address, the tax office will get a bit confused, because we'll say, well, did you mean home, or did you mean business, or did you mean some other address, because you might have a number of different offices. So there are a whole lot of gotchas that we've got to work through. Having said that, that's no way to stop us moving in that direction.
We've seen the research come from Optus today that they've made available to everybody here, they've made public, talking about what people want, how they want to interact with business, how they want to use their different devices. How receptive are you to those changing customer needs? And do they have anything to do with how I do something very technical, like deal with the tax office?
We're very receptive to it. We have, in the last 6 years, been getting our back office in order, because for us to be able to be seen as able to offer online services and a range of online services to all taxpayers, you've got to have the back-end systems supporting it. It's what our banks have done as well. They've got the back-end systems in order, and it means that the front end, in other words, how you interact with them, can then be far more agile and be receptive to where the customer needs are going. We're no different. We're just like a large financial institution, but we're just a little behind some of these other leading financial institutions in terms of how those interactions occur. But we think of them as services rather than necessarily channels in the first instance.
Okay.
So we're working through, well, what are the services that we offer? What are the transactions that we offer that would be fit for purpose on a mobile device or a tablet or a laptop? Because you'll all know we've got lots of forms that you fill out for the tax office, and some of them have pages and pages and pages, and I would defy anyone to fill it out on their iPhone accurately, because my finger's bigger than most of the tick boxes on these things as well. So we're looking also at those usability things, but very much we're looking to have our channel strategy be agnostic about the device, the time that you consume it, and in other words, how you consume it. And there'll be some visibility of this over the next 3, 6, 9 months or so in some of the services that we currently offer today. They'll be more contemporary and available for consumption on a range of different platforms.
And we're all tweeting, so would you care to tell us, and we'll tell the world what the changes will be?
Our government will make the necessary announcements.
That's a shame, isn't it? Tell me, you were speaking to me earlier about best practice being a bit of a trap, really, that you and your folks might know what best practice is, and it's just a matter of getting folks like me to recognise that.
Yeah, that's true. And it seems to be somewhat hypocritical when I talk about the client experience. And then if we say best practice is this, and you better just suck it in and you do it. Yes, a lot of best practice models are more about efficiency and, frankly, what is good for the ICT industry.
No.
Right? And that isn't necessarily what is good for the consumer or the citizen. And so, yes, I think that's something that we are moving on from. We had to, and we continue to have to demonstrate efficiencies, doing more with less, etc., as we all do. The government is no different. But we're moving on from that to say, well, okay, we've got our shop is in a reasonable state, notwithstanding what might happen in the next budget or whatever our future governments might be. But our shop is in reasonable state. So what should we be doing really when we view our services through the eyes of the citizen? And so best practice in contact centres is probably more about average handling time type measures and so forth. Well, I don't know about you, but I really get irritated by the fact that I have to hold on the phone for 15 or 20 minutes sometimes. And also the IVR, I have to go through so many convoluted, nested somethings to get to who I want. And all I really wanted to do was press 0 to talk to an operator. That's really what I wanted to do. So we've got to get smarter about that. So that's best practice when you look at it from how you're allocating your resources and your workforce and how you distribute the expertise that you've got, because you've got simple queries and you've got complex queries. And so we're struggling with that, but we are looking to segment in a much better way simple inquiries from difficult inquiries. And that's not just to send the calls to a different location or a different group of people to answer the calls. It's actually, if we segment it that way, then what we can do is we can build systems and services that will allow you to consume yourself.
Right.
And then it means that our people will benefit from that in that they'll get more challenging questions coming to them, and that's very stimulating. Instead of having to answer the same question
over and over
every
again.
day, I'm just a script monkey. No, you're not. You're actually a human being. You understand the system, and you're giving good support, and judgment is being reflected in your reply as well.
So Michael Hart talked about 80%. 80% of the time, the number one requirement of his customers was that the bank be reliable, and that very trailing far behind that was responsiveness. How does that stack up for the ATO, reliability versus responsiveness?
So reliability it's almost has to be a given for us. So I agree where Michael's. I would have thought that reliability is higher than 80% in many online. In fact, it's got to be 100% basically in online interactions. And so I'm not suggesting that we are 100%, but we're very high in terms of our reliability. We are, though, not so much real time. We still have a lot of our transactions are, you'll submit, as if you're a small business, you'll submit monthly or quarterly type business activity statements. And so our business is very lumpy. And it's not quite real time yet, although in some other tax jurisdictions, the collection of GST is at point of sale. And so that is going to real time. So we would need to be very mindful of that, and we are mindful of that in what we're doing into the future. For our stakeholders, our participants, certainty is in fact far more important to them, excuse me.
Certainty around what?
Certainty about your circumstances. So if we say, oh, thank you, Ellen, we're done, we're happy that you had to pay us $20, we'll talk to you next year or something.
That's a relief.
Yeah, you like that. But and so so when we're thinking about what are our services, we've also got to segment it by the frequency of interactions. So individuals want to interact with the office once a year when you submit your individual tax return.
Sure.
That for them, that is really good because, thank goodness, I don't need to talk with the tax office again. If we call someone, you almost have to have a defibrillator on the other end of the phone because, they're worried, why are you calling me? You know, and it really is a quite simple matter that we might be calling on. So we're somewhat reluctant to go and do those sorts of things. So for individuals, they want to interact with us not as often, but in that interaction, with that comes, well, now that that's done, that's certainty. Of course, we have to be professional, we have to be very tolerant and so forth, and understanding of circumstances, but certainty is a high thing for...
And that's interesting that you're saying that when you're thinking about the channels, what you've got to keep in mind is I might be happy to hear from my bank, but I really don't want to hear from the tax office.
That's correct.
Right. Okay, so that's kind of it's fairly serious, because we were speaking earlier about if you want to look at the idea of nudge economics, the nudge using behavioural economics, which I think goes to our theme of if you were to put the citizen at the centre and think about that, how might you nudge them into doing the right thing? And in the UK, many people will know they have a behavioural economics unit right at the centre of government that nudges people to do the right thing by using what we know about human beings. So for instance, you know, you might send me a text saying, well, by now, Ellen, 80% of people living in your postcode have paid their taxes, or 80% of people at your school have paid your taxes, and so we are herd creatures, we like to do the right thing. Or you might just send me a text saying, pay your taxes, rather than find me 3 months later. How do you start, is there a place for those sorts of techniques for your area of government?
Very much so, and in the area, especially in supporting small business, there is big opportunities there for us to help them and encourage good behaviours that will help them in the way they run the business. Take, for example, tradesmen. They're generally more interested in doing their trade than they are about necessarily doing their books. And
so sometimes it's hard to get an invoice out of them. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, yeah. You know, 3 weeks later you've got an invoice for something, and they worry about and they wonder why their cash flow is gone. You know, we provide a lot of support to small business in that regard, just trying to encourage what should be good business behaviour. You know, especially around cash flow, because if cash flow is tight, then it means that you won't be able to meet some of your obligations, one of which to your suppliers, and by the way, to the tax office as well.
So you're coming back to the idea of certainty.
Correct.
What do I know about what I will owe in terms of my BAS, in terms of my taxes at the end of the year?
So we are certainly looking at what place does behavioural economics have in that, and then if it does get to a situation where, say, small business is building up a debt, how can we use behavioural economics to help get the message through without it being seen as a really big stick?
Because you've been burnt in the past with that.
Oh, well, everyone is. Every supplier, and there's it's not just government, it's all suppliers and consumers have this issue of a tension between reliability of payments and not.
So there was an interesting idea that if you send a text to people, if you're saying, right, we're putting you at the centre, we don't want you to get copped with a fine, so therefore we're going to use the fact that we know that, you know, everybody has a mobile phone, the mobile phone number stays the same, we can contact you that way, we'll remind you that may not be the way that people want you to interact with them.
Yes, there are some people that find that invasive. And so we've got to be mindful of that. It doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing it. I think there's an awareness that we should, an awareness campaign about the tax office is contacting you not to find fault, but to help you understand what your obligations are, so that no one will end up defaulting or otherwise, right?
Thank you very much. It's been a wonderful conversation. I do like the idea of the kindler, gentler tax office. And I must say, I've experienced it recently. I was saying to Bill, I think he was a bit concerned when I said, I've had an old auntie die and she didn't pay her taxes for 10 years. And he was waiting, and I said, and the tax office has been marvellous. So, personal experience. Thank you very much, Bill Gibson.
Thank you.
That's good.